All right. Good afternoon. Let's try again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. A lot better. I know it's already 4 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock there are cocktails over there. So thank you guys for coming. It's really amazing you guys actually show up. So thank you. And my name is Larry Tsai. I'm the moderator for this panel, and my day job is BD and licensing for Fosun Pharma USA here in Boston. And I have a very distinguished panel here. You know, it's very well put together. I would like to thank Life Science Nation and Resi to give me the opportunity to moderate such a wonderful panel, because as you can see from their the brief description, we have a very diverse group, and from the investment, from the medical device, from legal side, and from Viva, they do everything as well. And so we would like to share a little bit about our experience, in the China cross-border partnership. And before we get into that, I would just like to ask the panel to introduce themselves as well as their companies. And Dong, you want to start?
Yeah, my name is Dong Ling, and most of my career actually is in the corporate world, industrial, and for the last 5 years I started learning the investment. The company I'm with is called Guoqian VC. We invest in medical device and life science in general, and early stage companies. We consider ourselves as a angel type of investment. The size is 700,000 to $3 million dollars. That's our range. But our fund is a Chinese money fund, so we can only invest a company in China. So if you want to do a joint venture, want to target the Chinese market, we can help. And also myself have an incubator in China, so that can help you set up the company. And also we have an incubator in US, in California. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is David Xu from Viva Biotech. Viva Biotech started as a CRO company. We are specialized in new drug discovery. We have a platform, our structure-based drug discovery is pretty advanced in the drug discovery space. And as this is our niche. Actually, we are doing really well over the years, and we listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange earlier this year. Just about 3 years ago, actually, we also dabbling into the investment business, and we are doing like the investment and incubation combination. And right now we have about 43 companies in the portfolio right now. Just like you, we are kind of start very early, seed round and A round financing, and our average investment size about $2 million, and ranging from 0.5 to 5 mil, that range. And we focus exclusively in the therapeutics, no device, no IVD, those kind of things, because we do not know the space well enough. And our portfolio company, about 2/3 of our portfolio company actually physically operating in the US, and about 1/3 operating in China. And those company operating in China also set up by returnees, so almost exclusive. We do have a few companies from Canada and one from Europe. So that's our portfolio. So looking forward to learn from this panel and talking to you guys.
Hi, my name is Catherine Zhang, and I work at MT Law. So we are a law firm that's headquartered in Lexington, Massachusetts, and we also have offices in LA, San Francisco, New York City, and Shanghai and Beijing. So we have about 60 people all throughout the offices and about 30 attorneys. And I would say half of our clients either speak Chinese or they're working with Chinese investors. So we help our clients in different areas because our firm is a general practice firm. like including business, corporate area, intellectual property, immigration, real estate. Well, I work in the business and corporate team. So my team work with a lot of like small and large international or domestic firms, companies, and also some major universities, both in China and in the States. Also some public traded companies. So we specialize in foreign direct investment, mergers and acquisitions, and private equity and venture capital financing. So I work with a lot of startups. They do biotech, medical device, pharmaceutical companies, high tech, and we help them with the get the financing and do a lot of stock purchase agreement, shareholder agreement, and also help them with like everyday contracts. So a little bit more about my background. I went to Peking University, Greece too, so I just found out, and we're alum. So I studied chemistry, and then I came to the States for graduate study. I got a master in chemistry, and I went to law school at BU, got my JD a few years ago. And yeah, I also do some IP work, like license agreement, trademark application, and patent. I'm sitting for patent bar now. So it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
My name is Grace Fu Palma. I grew up originally in China, but have been between China and the US for the past over 20 years, focusing in medtech. So I started off doing the first joint venture for Hewlett Packard Medical back in the early 90s, very different then. Subsequently, I worked at the big multinational corporations, startups, headed the startup companies. And China Med Device was founded 8 years ago, and then we acquired another local regulatory company. So currently we provide market access service for Western companies who want to go to China, primarily in the area of regulatory approval, CRO, clinical trials, and reimbursement assessment, market strategy, and also some strategic partnership selectively. So in China, when I first started, you can roll up our oncology system without registration. Now, in the past 4 years, the technical, regulatory, and clinical requirement is substantially different. So for the investors, we provide the due diligence sometimes, help them to understand, what does it take to get it registered, how long, how much money, what's the risk, any predicates there. So after the strategy, and you have a good idea what you're going to face. We have an office here in Boston. We have 5 people in the U.S. and then an office in Beijing, right down the street from CFDA. Now it's called an MPA. So we have over 20 people over there. Hope to get to know you more, and very honored to join this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. A little bit about Fosun Pharma, what they look for in their investment or licensing deal. They look at it when you look at the drug development timeline, where Fosun is almost like a barbell shape, where we look for late-stage clinical assets for China, right? Because we think that's where we know the time to the market, and we can truly maximize the value of any asset in the China market. And on the other hand, more related to RESI, which is early stage investment, right? So it's a preclinical stage asset where we can be more open, not just for China, right, but also for global. And for Fosun, because of the growth history, how company become what it is right now, is through a series of merger and acquisitions. So you look at the many portfolio companies Fosun has, they don't have overlapping therapeutic areas. So the plus side is it doesn't matter what the therapeutic areas, we probably can find a portfolio company that will help you to enter the Chinese market, whether it's through clinical development, through regulatory affairs, and most importantly, commercialization. So that's a little bit about Fosun. So when we look at the panel here, talking about investment and also for the partnership in China. I think from Dong, your fund primarily is about China, right? Yeah. So do you want to share with the audience, when you look at some sort of partnership, what are some of the selection criteria specifically for China? And
Yeah, for us, the first and most important criteria is you want to target the Chinese market. So you need to set your whatever the UFI or subsidiary or joint venture in China, so we can invest. And the money when we invest in your Chinese joint venture is actually can come out with different ways. I have done all of those, so for licensing, consulting, or contract. Those can be done later, but first you need to make a decision whether you want to go to China or not. When you decide you want to go there, then we can help. And also we have an incubator to help you to set up the company and get maximize your capability to get government incentives. Sometimes they give you free office space, and sometimes they give you start money, and others from some research grant, all those kind of things. So the criteria is you need to be innovative. So we might personally like to have innovative technology and the products, and that's how we want to. We don't want to do those kind of me too or me better kind of thing. We want to have true innovative technology and the products to help.
so just to follow up on what you said, do you look at a product or platform type of?
Both. Yeah, we prefer platform, but for product we also want to invest. If you are truly innovative.
Before I ask my next question, this is truly meant to be an interactive session. So the more questions you ask specifically relate to your case, the more insight you're gonna gain. So that's for your own benefit. So my next question before I turn to the other panelists is, when you mentioned about the incentives coming through, are those non-diluted funding you're talking about?
Yeah, like the free office space, they sometimes even build a clean room for you, the manufacturing space. Those are all free, but also government, they have also those kind of government funds they can invest. Those are dilutive, they may take shares, but the exit for them, sometimes they just take the commercial rate as interest and exit. Sometimes they ask a little bit more. That depends on how you negotiate with the government at the beginning. So there's for the government funds, they also need to be sustainable, so they also need to have some kind of a return, but that's not their main goal. The main goal is to bring business to their city. So the different cities, they are still competing for technology, for business, for the employment and the tax revenue for those. So that's their purpose. So for us, we don't suggest foreign companies to go to big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, Guangzhou, because the government, if you are not Fortune 500, they don't talk to you. So, but the small cities, they still try to compete, try to make their traditional business move into high tech. They have money to help you to start.
Great. So if you ever had those kind of opportunities, talk to Dong, and he will lead you into China. David, I know Viva does a lot of things, and you mentioned about the investment, early incubating early stage company. Don't ask me how I found out. You also have a very creative investment, other than just injecting a little bit of capital, but you also have the in-kind services. I think that really something quite different, and you can help early company, startup company to get up very up to speed very quickly.
Yeah. So actually, we pretty much, our philosophy, whatever a startup needs, will provide. That's including capital, and for startup companies, oftentimes give me money, I can figure out what to do with it. Actually, in reality, it's not the case. Just for example, even just to get a facility, get it up and running, it takes very easily 6 months. And after you get the money and you recruit people and get the people trained and everything, and it's another 6 months. And so it takes a lot of time. So our philosophy is, how can we get them up and running quickly particularly after they get the money. So that's how we kind of combined. We have really built upon our CIO service platform. It's once we we decide this is a worthy idea to invest in, and from the time we have the whole system work out. You can register in Cayman Island, you can register in Hong Kong or mainland China. Typically at SPA stage, and we already start registration. The registration company open account. So by the time we sign everything, you have account ready and the money is already in the bank. And within normally it's within a month. Typical is like 2 to 3 weeks. The chemistry can start in the lab. So we simultaneously we have about 400 chemists now. The founder will go there and pick their own team, build their own team. It's a 5 people, 10 people team built right simultaneously, so we can start right away. They don't have to worry about office and anything, and so everything is kind of pretty worked out. It's a very smooth process. This essentially saves at least 6 to 9 months of the founder's time, which is very, very critical at the early stage. So that's how we kind of. It's not like a specifically, if you say what we do, I cannot tell. It's really depend on the need of the founders.
That's great. So, to get it up to speed for early stage startups is very, very critical. So the Veeva is really set up for this kind of, endeavor at the early stage. And when David mentioned about the registering and all those things that come up, it's really a good segue to Catherine, where you need a lot of legal help, and you mind share a little bit about the pros and cons, and also what to watch out where you register, and dealing with different kind of regulatory, just the maze, the area you have to navigate through. You want to share something with the audience?
Sure, would love to. So we have a lot of startups that just came, that came to us, and they had an idea. They may be working for a big company, or they're working in a university lab, and they have this amazing idea and they want to start their company. So they will come to us, and then we will advise them on how to set up their business. So we will advise them where you should choose your company to register, and we will tell them, most of the public traded companies are C Corp in Delaware, and then we will tell them the difference between registering a local company in Massachusetts, because most of our clients start here in the Boston area, then registering a company in Delaware, and then have a foreign company in Massachusetts. So a lot of our clients will listen to us and then start their company as a C Corp in Delaware, and then start a foreign company in Massachusetts. And then also there are a lot of clients, they will say, oh, we are interested in offshore companies, so we will help them to structure VIE, structure. Then we talk about the difference between Cayman Island and British Virgin Islands, and then set up a Hong Kong company, and then wholly owned a Delaware company, and then through contractual agreement, then you can go with a Chinese company, and then how that work. So it all varies, and I would say recently we've got a lot of discussions regarding CFIUS, just because last year, I'm sure everyone has already known CFIUS, Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. It was actually established in 1975. The reason there have been so many discussions lately because there was a new law that was signed into by Trump administration back in August 2018, and it's called FIRMA. It's a long name. I don't know who came up with that name, but let me try it. The Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act of 2018. And the major changes that worry our clients were changes from voluntary filing to mandatory filing on certain transactions. And the second major change is that it broadens the CFIUS jurisdiction from It used to be controlling investment. Now CFIUS also have jurisdiction on non-controlling investments. And then the third one is a shortened declaration process compared to the traditional notice filing. So we did have a client, we successfully helped a client a couple months ago to file a declaration process with the CFIUS. They actually got a result back within 30 days, well, 33 days to be exact. And they were like, the CFIUS was saying, okay, you are now subject to this mandatory filing, but that doesn't mean that they're free. They're worry-free, because CFIUS can always, they don't have statute of limitation period, so they can always come back to you and say, hey, I think we need more information in your company. So that's why we tend to tell our clients who came to us on advice, just be prepared. Get the CFIUS on your checklist, no matter whether you're an investor or you're a company who's getting investment from China. Sorry, I probably talked too much.
No, thank you. From legal, then we just have to talk about the regulatory affairs and more specifically medical devices and
Or
diagnostics.
or drugs.
Take it away, Grace.
How many of you have been to China or done business with China? So you do have some knowledge of China, that's good. It's night and day difference. The only country in this planet that has 20% annual growth rate in the medtech field. The second largest market next to the US. So there's a lot of risk, of course, everybody heard about the IP issue. So the first step when you go to China, you need to register your product to get you approved before you can sell. But if you're in the gene, the NGS, there's gray area on the diagnostic because China has a huge private population. So some of those companies are just selling to the third-party labs, so those don't register. But official registration is go through the China FDA. Last year they changed the name to NMPA now. Used to be SFDA. So they keep changing names because that reflects China now is emphasizing the complete product life cycle from registration to post-market. China wants to be raising its standard, which is good. So the partner you find in the regulatory approval process means their quality is higher. So for companies like earlier, you talk about investors, the reform, a lot of reforms now emphasizing in the registration, when you go, the first question is what classification you have, right? That's 1, 2, 3. That's equivalent to the US FDA exempt, 510K, PMA, so class 3 is equivalent to PMA. But China has a lot more class 3 products than FDA, about 5%, China has 30% in class 3. And then the second question you ask is in the strategy, you think about whether it's clinical exempt or not, and the technical standards. You could have international tests, but in China, you may have to repeat some of the local tests because some of the local standard requirements are also different. So when you do funding, raise money, the first step I think is good. We provide the strategy package to help you understand what the risks, what the requirements, the budgets, the timeline. This way, when you talk to the investor, like these people, you give them the report. There's a clear roadmap. You think about the China regulatory strategy. Because China now, it's very hard to get the approval than before. Now, especially with the regulatory reform, China introduced the MAH system, which means that before, like in this country, in the US, you have contract manufacturing. And then you, as the inventor, you have the design, you own the market, access the authorization, but you give it to the contract manufacturer to make it. In China, if domestic product, I'm not talking about foreign product. In China, if you are a Chinese master scientist, develop something, you need to also set up the factory. You cannot not produce and get your product approved in China until the MAH system. So that's very different dynamic. So the MAH system, like David and Nim was talking about the the incentives. So with the MAH system, you don't have to have a manufacturer anymore. You can set up, through legal, through whatever, you set up a local entity. there are certain requirements. You have a local partner that meets the MAH requirement. And then you can have the contract manufacturing to do some of this work to expedite your market. Because, you know, they talk about incubators, the government funding, so it's hard to get money from the US. So, you know, through the regulatory approval process, through the MAH, through the other regulatory pathways, there are many, and then there's the innovation pathway where you don't need a country of origin approval. You can go to China directly. And also China reforms to accept overseas clinical data. So, you know, you're talking about parallel. How do you get, if you get to China and US market at the same time, your valuation, your multiples for your company is going to go through the roof, two biggest market in the world. So how do you do that? So you can, when you design your clinical trial, when you design all these bio-expensive tests you have to do, also think about what the China requirements are. So at least when you do the test, like we helped a client do a $500 million biotest, it's an implantable. So we reviewed their test, and we saved them a lot of money because there were certain standards that was not required by the US, but required by China. So we built this in, so that report could be used in China as well as in the US. So if you don't look at it, and then you may have, because you are missing certain technical standards, you have to repeat your test, especially in certain high-risk devices. So there are a lot of tricks, there are a lot of pathways, and China is definitely moving more towards the international standards, but at the same time, there are some nuances that we can certainly help you navigate.
Certainly, you're the right person. And before I, pause and ask the audience to ask some questions, I would like to share a little bit of my 2 cents about, innovation and what type of projects we look at. And Grace touched upon one key point I want to make is, she said, there are some required tests, for that particular case. In China, it's not required. In the US, that's just the things you really need to be on the lookout, be very mindful of that. From my perspective, when I look at innovative, especially early stage, it actually doesn't matter what stage of the innovative projects I'm reviewing. The one thing is about IP. IP, sometimes you think we have, US, it's great, and Europe as well. And nowadays, when you talk about, China partnership, think about the filing that covered China early, and there are so many cases we got into some discussion, and all of a sudden they said, we just for whatever reason, the long list, they didn't file, it's not covered in China. That's a huge. It's not saying we don't have any mechanism to deal with that, but that just handicapped your project significantly. And another thing is the IP system, they're very similar, but also just because you got, composition of matter or even something granted in the US might not be, a short in for you to get Chinese patent protection. So working with the IP team early and think about the China strategy early, that will be very, very important. So with that, I would like to open up the Q&A, and who's the bravest? I cannot promise that I have a gift for you like some other panels, but in 30 minutes there will be alcohol aside. Yes, please.
With all this growth and change and new laws and requirements, is there a place for maybe U.S. consultants to interface between your groups and technology people in the U.S.? I mean, it sounds like most of you are based here, but travel back and forth to Asia is difficult. Do you like to do all your work directly? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Grace, or you wanted?
So, we partner, we don't do FDA work. We have office in China, so we do a complete turnkey solution for China. So when our clients ask for US work, we work with our partners in the U.S. for different things, like you know, if it's IP, we try to introduce them to the U.S. companies. Is that your question?
And what about the other way around, if you're looking for companies to invest in or?
That might be a good question for Don or David to answer. Do you typically work with, you know, American-based consultant?
We have you know 40-something companies in different stages of development, and we actually definitely we need all kind of experts because the startups oftentimes we just start with one person. They cannot possibly to know everything, and actually one of the things I'm trying to do is put together expert panel cover the whole span of drug development process as well as, you know, including regulatory and IP. So we do need advice both ways because we don't focus on just China. So the portfolio company don't focus in China. So they need expertise for the Chinese market as well as expertise for the US market. And Europe actually, right now the demand for European market is very low. I don't know why, because maybe it's not in the radar screen yet.
Because MDR, that make it so difficult. It used to be, you know, Europe first and then US. Now, with the MDR, it's US first and China, MDR, Europe.
Yeah.
That reform
Yeah.
make it so difficult.
So, can I
Go.
just, yeah, really quickly. So we work with companies and investors in both the US and China. So it's both ways, either Chinese investors or companies coming to the US or US the startups or entrepreneurs looking for investment in China. So when we got a lot of comments from them, they were saying that the reason they want to work with us because we have a lot of attorneys who speak Chinese and who know Chinese culture, and we have, everyone probably knows the Chinese guanxi. So they come to us, they will just find us as one stop, and we talk to them with their legal needs, and then we can put them in the right people in China. So instead of talking to different attorneys from IP department, from real estate department, from business and corporate department, instead they're just talking to me or my team, and then we will help them communicate with other attorneys. So we think that's one of the advantages of our firm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Our company also, our incubator go both ways. We do have another incubator in US. So US, the legal firm we use is Drone Stays, and we also have a regulatory assistant to us, consulting company. So we do look at also looking for the set up some relation with U.S. Service companies or other service providers.
I have an attorney question.
That's great.
So, if a company has been offered metropolitan and district financing, no payback, no equity, and you're considering setting up this subsidiary, how much?
Sorry to interrupt. So the subsidiary is
It's going to be in China.
In China, okay.
It's definitely in China.
Okay.
What is the level of support and documentation generally required on the part of the sponsor? Let's call the U.S. company the sponsor. What kind of documentation? You're going to work with the municipal and the district, and you're going to probably work with a business organization like
Right.
Don's and something along that line. So how much time and energy is it going to take for the U.S. company to provide the documentation to make this happen?
Well, I'm assuming you're asking about how much time it's going to take the local government in China to process and get all
Well,
the
I'm not,
documents,
yeah.
right?
What are you going to need in terms of documentation? I mean, in terms of the U.S. company, Does the Chinese government require to set up an understanding of the C Corp structure and articles of incorporation?
Yes.
And what's the list?
So because for me, our team is mostly talking about the U.S. law. So for us, in terms to gather all the documents from the company, including the articles of well, different company, different places call it different name, but like articles, bylaws, and the company, the company registration certificate, it shouldn't take too much time, and all the board resolutions. But I don't know how much time it's gonna take in the Chinese part to get their set up, but like it depends from different locations. It could take a couple of months if you know the right people and the right place to go. It also varies, depends on the city. But here in the US part, for us, we just have a company who's going to China and just to sort of put the data room together. And only took a couple of days. They have pretty much all the documents ready. And it's mostly just internal documents and the consents, all the shareholder agreements, SPAs, and the company's, the documents from the government. Most of them can be printed online. It's so convenient. So it shouldn't take too much time from the U.S. side. But the China side, it's hard to say. I'm not sure if that's what
I think that's what I'm asking, yeah.
Okay.
What do we, it's like due diligence for an investor.
Due diligence.
Yeah, so that answers the question.
Okay, great.
Yes, Lloyd.
A question about the drug therapeutics, the harmonization between the Chinese equivalent to FDA and US FDA. I'm with the venture fund. We invest in a company that looking to do a phase 3 in the US, Europe, and now we considering to in China. You say second largest economy, right? So we cannot go without it. So the challenge we're facing is, I heard off and on that there is an advisable idea to start register with China as early as possible. So you think there is a dual tracks? In other words, if we found the NDA in the US, can we use the same documentation to China, or we have to do the whole thing again in China? Will the Chinese equivalent FDA accept what we already invest, because we have data with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, right? So we have to go to NDA to a very lengthy documentation. So my question is, assuming there is a harmonization of the Chinese and US, I heard about that, but how close is it? Should we assume that there is a automatic acceptance of the US documentation, or we have to start from scratch? And what is your advice?
You need to, it's case by case specific. Also, if you're with, I don't know if it's drug or device.
It's a drug.
It's a drug.
Yes.
The drug has, priority pathway. If it's cancer drug, we were evaluating a companion diagnostic for Bayer. The CFDA want their drug on the market, and they said, I only want 10 cases, we'll put you on a special track in less than, track take how many years? Less than 2 years, you're going to be on the market. And so and then there are companies with drugs, I think it's out earlier than device. Device is starting to accept overseas clinical data, but you must meet the published, now it's called NMPA before CFDA, you must meet their guideline of what type of acceptance. For drug especially, it's more encouraging because you can do multi-center clinical trial, including China as part of the center trial, because you got to address the ethnicity differences. That's why, early on, it's not just like a white Caucasian could react differently with the Chinese population. So it's specific, case specific. I don't think there's just, you give me FDA data, I'll accept. No.
Yes, you asked, let me be more specific. We invest in a company that have the CNS program, which is for treatment of Alzheimer's disease. It's truly challenging because there are no drug being approved in the US for disease, and a lot of drugs been failed. So the company we invest, they're able to proceed to phase 3 soon. So we are investor. We don't know. We just don't know, put the money into company, right? So we encourage them to open more markets by like you say, rather than waiting the US first and then look
Yeah.
overseas, we like to start simultaneously.
Yeah,
So I'd like to
definitely.
hear from your feedback. David, you
So
have some
in
opinion
that
about?
case, you haven't started your phase 3.
We go to NEA soon.
Yeah, definitely you need to have a few centers in China.
Yes, that's right.
They require certain, just to address ethnicity issue,
Yeah.
and you would need a certain percentage of population, the patient pool to be Chinese, actually any Asian, it will be accepted. It's again, you need to have a conversation with the NMPA first. And most likely, before you can conduct phase 3 study, you already need to do a bridging study, just to make sure that you will be able to, R&D will be able to accept it. You need to have a certain percentage of patients, the data, to be able to open your phase 3 study in China.
So, Tony, can you advise who set up, you think, Catherine?
For FDA's,
Yeah.
honestly, it's not my specialty, so, but we do have someone from our firm who can answer that question, so I can put you in touch with.
What do you mean set up? You don't, if you do multi-center trial with China, you,
Any CRO.
yeah, you
Yeah.
don't need set up an entity there.
Okay.
We're legal agents, so if you want to do it, we can represent you without you setting up anything in China.
Yeah. Is it advisable for us? So I'll take a little bit of time because I like you mentioned about case study. I like to throw out a couple of specific questions to pick your brain. Particularly, don't have to pay attorney fee.
She's the most expensive
attorney
one.
fee. Yeah. Is it advisable for us to work with a major pharma companies and help with the CEO, or is it we can also set up as a US-based company, that company can set up a CRO in China, right? Do we have to set up a
No,
company?
you don't need to. There's no point of, if you just have one drug, why you want to set up another company in China? So we can help you, they can help you. It's just a lot faster. We can work directly with your US entity, follow the same protocol, and then make sure the China PI agrees and meets the NIPA regulatory standards, and you don't need to set up anything. It's save you money, save you cost. You set up something, they have no clue, and it just costs you more and drag you longer.
Yeah, but if you are mentioning about Chinese company, only if you want to commercialize this in China, probably it's more advisable now to talk to some of the Chinese companies, see if you can co-develop it and co-market in China. If you have nothing, probably it's more advisable to have a partner in China.
Yes, I think you're just saying, right, we long-term would like to open potential market, the licensing markets in
Yeah.
China. So not just the CEO and on, we're looking for bigger China. It's a big market for
Yeah.
that particular drug. So they're viable to open up. I like to talk further with you. I don't want to take a lot of time.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The other after.
Trick question. Definition of manufacturing in China to get advantage and approval. Make it in China, sell it in China. If you have the technology, I'll just give you an example, you can tell me right or wrong. Drug-eluting contact lens to replace eye drops. To make a contact lens that elutes a drug, it's a mix with some monomers and silicon hydrogel, and it's basically injected into a mold, and you make the contact lens in China. However, the secret sauce, the technology, is how you formulate this material into this mix. And what I'm thinking about is shipping the material to be made in China into the final form of a contact lens that delivers a drug in 55-gallon drums. I'm going to make that delivery platform with that drug in China. Does that qualify as manufacturing in China?
We just actually helping one client. They have an IVD platform, and then it's in the dish. It's a beads, and then the coating the beads. Should you do they don't want to do the coating in China because that's their secret recipe. They just
Same idea.
want to do so. It depends. It really we need to look at the critical steps of your manufacturing process. If your material formulation is a step, 4 is more like you have multiple critical steps. That's just one of the multiple critical steps. But up down towards the finished goods area, you can't just have a finished goods and have the last step in China, that doesn't pass. So there are also, depending on the device, there are specific definition of, like this beads type of products, there's specific definition, guideline, which is the critical step you have to do in China. So for your device, we can have the technical people take a look to see which step is constituted as the critical step. Used to be very easy. Before the reform, before President Xi came to power, a lot of the play the game type of thing, you just do the final packaging, final inspection, boom, you're qualified. But that kind of days passed. It's now, there are a lot of requirements.
Uh-huh. Well, that's very interesting.
Sorry to burst your bubble.
Well, it still hasn't completely burst, but
Okay,
Correct.
yeah.
it's on the verge of being a concern.
Okay, yeah, good. You have something to work on afterwards. Yes.
On a similar note, what about getting money out? Again, if you went in and you commercialized your product in China, can you get your capital or returns back out?
I don't think that's a concern, and it's more of what the regulation right now is putting on sort of a limit or at the scrutiny, more scrutiny in terms of Chinese asset, from RMB based and converted into US dollar investment. But if you, legitimately make the money and in China and you want to take it out, I don't think there's any restriction or limit on that. Otherwise, yeah, a lot of companies will pack up and leave.
There are rumors that there is a problem, but I don't know if it's true.
Okay,
I think the concern is more about tax.
What about tax?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Larry said and also David was saying. So it's not a concern, especially from the U.S. regulation purpose. The whole concern was that there was some kind of deals or the sensitive information or non-public information that's coming to China that's not being aware by CFIUS. So for a U.S. company that's set up China subsidiaries and then getting money back for the products, that shouldn't be like part of the jurisdiction of CFIUS. So I don't see any problems. It's the other way, like the Chinese RMB who wants to invest in U.S. and it has to go through ODI process. It takes a while, and not all the areas will be approved by the Chinese governments, like real estate and entertainment, casino, restaurant. That's absolutely not.
Yes.
With the 70-year anniversary at the end of the month, do you anticipate there's going to be changes in regulations tightening up?
Yeah, there's always change.
I don't think that's tied to that specific date, but in Chinese, of course, I'm jumping the gun in front of Grace, but what I would like to say, the regulation is changing and ever evolving, but in general, the trend is getting better, more similar to the U.S. and the rest of the world. Lloyd asked about the ICH, the harmonization, and it's just making the life science industry in China more on par with the rest of the world and make it more conducive to that business in China. Am I on the right track? I shouldn't, but I feel like...
No, I mean, the trend is there. It's definitely trying. China wants to innovate. It started off when I was in Beijing growing up. It's made in China. We would do everything to get the foreign capital into China. And then after made in China, it became R&D in China. And now it's said R&D is not enough, it need to innovate in China. So when you innovate in China, you got to raise your standards to the international standards. The old guerrilla type of, that's why 2,000 manufacturers on the device used to be 16,000 a few years ago, now it's 14,000. Because when the barrier is higher, a lot of these smaller ones will automatically eliminate it. So in terms of the question about October, the National Congress, usually like on the diagnostic and device side, the 680 extension, that's a major state council level regulation. That was first issued. Usually there was the two congresses in China in October, usually associated with those. there is some new announcement. And then in October, November, on the device diagnostic side, they are expecting, because the 680 extension has been going on drafting mode for almost a year, so they were trying to get that from a draft to a final implementation stage. So there are something expected before the end of the year, especially the 70 year, right? Across the industry, you got to have some celebration. Zoom was banned. That's the negative part of China. We use Zoom a lot because we have.
Since when?
Yesterday.
You got your answer. Last question.
Are there instances where the Chinese therapeutic regulators will look at things independently, sort of more broadly than the FDA? So a specific example here, we have a phase 2 drug that is for metabolic syndrome, and the FDA stubbornly refuses to recognize that metabolic syndrome is a disease. Is there any sort of independent thinking in China on addressing the problem of prediabetes, metabolic syndrome differently than the US?
That actually, I think China is better when you have something new, because China, I call the China NMPA, CFDA a teenager. US FDA, I call them grandfather, because when you're grandfather, you know it all, right? You have so much resources, scientists. Teenagers, you know, there was no regulatory law until 2000 in China. So in that situation, plus China CFDA has its expert bank, so with a lot of doctors. So it's really whether it's going to be approved or not, clinically significant, they ask this bank of doctors. So if this bank of doctors believe that it's good for China, it should be classified this way. So this Chinese bank of doctors, and you know their public information. So if you know what these doctors think, maybe you should go to China, especially if it hasn't been, it's innovation track, you don't need home country approval, so you may introduce it in China first.
But I will caution that as a teenager, it is a good student actually of FDA, and the rumor has it we're gonna follow the ICD-9 code, ICD-10 now code as well. So it's we're gonna be pretty much, you know, after we join ICH guideline and everything, it's gonna be homogenized more and more than be different.
It could. So before that happens, you know, you want to try, right?
There's some risks, but you know,
Yeah.
give it a shot.
Well, everything has risk, right? You got to take the risk. It's all time, money, cost. Which one is more important? You want to juggle.
Okay. I was given this signal, and this is absolutely, definitely not rehearsed. Pop quiz time. I just want, if you can give the audience one word of advice or short advice, what would it be?
I would say this Nike slogan, right? Just do it. Go China and find out what it is and target the market. It's going to be the #1 market in the world. So don't miss the opportunity.
I think China. I've been in China for just a couple of years now. It's really a great time for biotech industry in China. It has the capital is there, and it has the talents over the years, build up the talents, and you know the CRO business has been mature, probably best than anywhere in the world. So it has all the conditions to be, you know, for the biotech industry to thrive in China today.
So I would say, find the right counsel. It doesn't
Legal
matter
counsel.
Yeah, legal counsel, right. It doesn't matter how big the law firm is. We do have some clients who switch from big law firm, no offense, to us, just because we know the local culture and we do have the right resources, and we are so very efficient of getting back to our clients. And one last thing about CFIUS, I do have a thing for CFIUS, I'm sorry. It's just, we do have some good news for medical device companies and pharmaceutical companies, and like our first-hand experience, we got a few approvals for the drug company who wants to take Chinese investment money, and they all got clearance from CFIUS. So that's really good.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Grace.
I echo, you need somebody to help you navigate if you're not familiar with China. Good consultants, regulatory changed so much in the past 4 years. And I just take the risk. In 2005, I founded the Chinese American Heart Association. Back then, you go to ACC, if you're in the cardiovascular field back then, there was hardly any Chinese doctors. And now, 300, 400, you go to those meetings. So we always host China Night events at these meetings, and it's huge difference. So that's like 2005 to now, 14 years, right? So you would never see that in the next 10 years, China is going to be #1. Unless you take the risk, you jump into it. And a lot of people, I know you're concerned about IP. The 2 years ago, I think China passed the IP law that has penalty for the first time. When I was in Beida, my professor, the penalty law professor, you know how big that was towards the late 80s. I graduated 87. So the penalty law for the entire China was 10 pages, this little pamphlet, that's all. So when you think about, that's 30 years ago now. So it's such a pamphlet because we don't have the concept. So, and then if you don't have the concept, how do you follow the rule? So now with the regulation, with the development, it's a fast rate. So I think the IP will be respected, and you find right consultant to help you, and you're going to take the right for to be the #1.
Grace just took the word I was going to say, IP, out of my mouth. So for everyone in here, whether you're young or young at heart, I would just say, go west, young man. Let's say